So after it took me nearly 10 months to finish my last video, maybe we can do something a little easier, a little more chill now. So let's just rank all the jocks in my personal opinion tier list and see where each of them rank. So, starting off from the fuck you tier, we only find one jock here, that being Bryce. In case you couldn't tell from the thumbnail, since I think it was pretty obvious. But why I don't really like Bryce? Well, I actually kinda did in the past, back when we only had Demo 1 to go off of, but in the transition between Demo 1 and Demo 2, I think the devs kinda sharpened Bryce's corners a bit. And to that I say that, for me at least, it definitely made him lose quite a few points, since he went from 3rd in my ranking to dead last. But why exactly so? Well, I think it has to do mainly with the fact that between Demo 1 and Demo 2, I think the devs kinda slightly changed direction on the whole homophobia aspect, which is personally not really a plot point generally that I'm overly fond with. I prefer when a story is, treated outside of that. That's not really like the main cause of conflict in the characters. So Bryce was already a bit skeptical for me, that's why he was 3rd and not 2nd or 1st. But then, between Demo 1 and Demo 2, in Demo 1, yes, maybe you could say there was a bit of homophobia in what Bryce did and what he said, but you couldn't necessarily confirm it. While in Demo 2 it's just like plain simple, he's homophobic, internalized homophobia, the whole package deal. And so to that I'm a bit disappointed, but I understand it at the end of the day. But what I think really sealed the nail in the coffin for me on his character is the interaction with the others. While I actually think that most of the others really benefited from the group dynamic as a whole, we get to see them interact all with each other in Demo 2 and in pairs. But instead, every time he opens his damn mouth, I just want to strangle him. Because he's so damn annoying. He's always bitching about something and someone is insulting people, and I'm just like, when is this gonna end? Because I can't stand him. He's a total naysayer, he's always ruining the fun, he's always insulting people, and like, I get that it's part of his character, he's gonna grow out of it, character development and all that. He'll come out, first to probably Ace, because I mean, he's fucking him, but also like to his brother and to his dad. But like, to reach that point I will have had to put up with him for at least a quarter of the game, when he's like all homophobic, I mean straight, in his stupid facade. So I really can't say that I enjoy my time with him as much as I enjoy my time with the other jocks. And considering his initial presentation, I also kinda have a hard time believing that Ace would choose him over the other jocks in general, because like, why would you pick the guy that treats you like the dirt under your shoes when you have like 5 other guys that treat you like a million times better? But I suppose that, that brings back to mind a video I saw about the so-called The Elements, which actually explained this whole concept pretty well. I thought I got the attraction to the, straight frat bro thing before, but after watching this video, if I find it, I'll probably put it up on screen somewhere. But I understand for who he's made of, in the crowd he wants to please, and he certainly does it. But for me, it's just such a big no, I don't want to play and stay with him, and he's gonna be annoying, and I don't even want to think about it. However, it's not like I can't like a good homophobe character, but to me, they just kinda need to have some class, some pizzazz, to cover up just so rotten they are on the inside. And Bryce is exactly the kind of people I avoid like the plague on the outside, and he's exactly the kind of people I avoid like the plague on the inside. So yeah, he 100% doesn't check the box, since again, he is pretty well fratty in his appearance, which is actually kinda also a main drawback for him, in my eyes. Like, don't really like his fratty looks, and I'm also kinda mad that he's like orange, which is like my favorite color, in case you couldn't tell from my avatar. But the only orange thing about him is his ginger ass hair. So, he's not really helping himself in this department either. As far as what's underneath the clothes is concerned, however, I'm personally not really in love with how chubby Bryce is made to be. Generally, I do like kanks in my BLs, but, just something about the way that how he's kind of fluffy, not in a hairy sense, but just in a squishy sense, doesn't really do it for me, doesn't really tick my boxes for what is a good BL body in my opinion. Of course, you feel free to disagree. But also like his dick on the funny scale, because yes, as a straight main, I do rank the BL dicks on how funny they are, because that's just the only enjoyment I can get out of them. But I think it's pretty good, the bigger they are, the funnier they are. Right, he is big, but he's not so overly big that, I laugh at it, like some other people on this tier list, much higher up. So, overall, also his body doesn't really do it for me. I can say that I find any redeeming qualities in it, except for, well, I guess his ass would be quite fun to kick, which is just about the only reason I'd ever go up to someone like Bryce, now that I think about it. But with that said, sorry Bryce fans for putting your best boy so low, feel free to defend him in the comments if you so wish. But now let's move on to our definitely mediocre tier, which also has only one member in it, which is the dog boy Yuuto. It might sound strange for someone that clearly has a thing for animals, but as much as I might love zoology, well, there is an exception to my loves, and dogs are exactly that, exceptions. It may or may not have something to do with the fact that I've been desperately afraid of dogs for most of my life, and even to these days, as an adult, I can't say that I feel comfortable with a dog in the room with me. So what endears Yuuto to most of his fans, that being his puppy behavior and general dog's demeanor, is exactly what turns me off of him for good. As much as I'm not completely heartless and I can't in good conscience say that puppies are not cute, I also can say that they are my brand of cute and what I find endearing and adorable. Because yes, certainly Yuuto has his moments of being endearing, adorable, and he certainly has plenty of funny moments, but his general lack of autonomy, the fact that he's very forgetful and kinda disorganized, which it's a bit close to home to me because yeah, I can sort of relate to being like that, so I do need to give him some grace under that aspect, but that doesn't really change the fact that I don't really look forward to seeing this kind of dynamic at play with Ace during the course of the game. But on the bright side of what I like about Yuuto, I do find his general brand of humor that is extremely vulgar, decently funny. It's not my favorite, but I think it's funny, and I like how much of a big imagination he has. I can definitely relate to in a positive way to this aspect, so that definitely bumps him up a few many tiers after Bryce. That, and of course the fact that he is nice to Ace and gets to shine in the group dynamics, and especially with Avan, I think his brand of humor is elevated a lot because he has Avan, which is the straight man in the situation. He can bounce off puns and, general vulgarities out of. That also, settles him decently high placement compared to Bryce. But enough tearing into Bryce, I think I've done that enough in this video. So let's just move on really quickly to Yuuto's appearance because I don't have terribly much to say about it. His clothes are, I think, executed very well. They are not just necessarily my personal style. This sort of Japanese chaotic gremlin vibe he has fits him very well, but as I said, just not necessarily appeal to me in a significant way. As far as body goes, I find him a bit too dry. He's a bit flat, and I think I'm not overly in love with how his shoulders are overly large compared to the rest of his body. Of course, he's a volleyball player, he's gonna have large shoulders, but I find that this gives his body a general sense of disharmony which I don't quite like, and I can say the same about his dick. Since it's short, it's stubby, I don't find it funny at all, which is the worst thing, and I also don't really like the kind of foreskin he has, necessarily. So yeah, sadly Yuuto for me has the worst dick overall. Also, said dick is probably very unsanitary considering Yuuto's aversion to soap and water. I know many people like that, the mask stink sort of kink, I cannot say that's something I have any kind of inclination towards. I'm not someone that is necessarily overly obsessed with cleanliness, but Yuuto definitely falls below the line of what I find acceptable if he's left on his own devices. Thank you, Avan, for making him take baths and showers on a regular basis. Now, moving on from Yuuto, in the certainly fine tier, we find our sunboy, Leo, or Leo, like I might default to call him a couple of times, but I know it's Leo. Sometimes I call him Leo because that's how we say it in Italian. But beyond that, what can I say about Leo? Well, he's kind of an interesting character for me, because I definitely enjoy him a lot more when I'm actually, you know, playing the game, see him talk, interact with the other characters. And that's mainly because when I'm playing it, I think that I can more or less see his good traits, you know, his sunny disposition, his altruism, in that sort of sense. While maybe when I'm not actively playing a route with him or I'm reading a scene with him, I tend to focus more on the fact that he's, you know, this sort of very loud and expansive extrovert. And in that sense, I don't think he's the kind of person I could reasonably, not necessarily get along with, but be friends with, because I'm extremely introverted. And, you know, having someone like Leo that always wants to go out to do things and, you know, stay with friends, also find that sort of level of social acceptance is not really something that I can say I relate to in any kind of capacity. I'm extremely introverted, and I've never really cared about what people think about me, in case you couldn't tell, because clearly this is a very, very normal kind of video to do if you're straight. But that aside, I can say that I certainly like him well enough with Ace. I think they are one of the more realistic pairings in terms of this was, you know, real life and not a game where, you know, you get to pick your own choices. But overall, even in terms of physical appearance, despite yellow being my second favorite color after orange, Leo doesn't really capture me in any meaningful way. I do like his outfit well enough, but it just doesn't appeal to me because it's quite cool, but it's also kind of going on that more trendy, modern style, which is not something I feel drawn to, because again, usually whenever something is popular, I'm like, oh, this thing is popular, okay, then I'm not gonna like it. You know, it's a bit of a silly reaction, all things considered, especially because, I mean, we are talking about relatively superficial stuff at the end of the day, but still, I can say I quite put Leo's outfit among my favorite, even if it's admittedly a pretty cool outfit. When it comes to body type instead, Leo is the twink of the game, and to that I say that, you know, I've said it already, but Anks when it comes to BLs are my go-to, because my main appeal when I read a BL, I think one of the best things is, you know, being able to see masculine characters being able to be vulnerable with each other and, you know, express feelings. And of course, that's not to say that, you know, if you are twinkish, you cannot be also masculine, or if you are, you know, hunk, you can't be feminine. But when it comes to selling me personally, this sort of boys love fantasy, I usually tend to prefer hunks and, you know, bigger guys compared to twinkish boys. In this sense, so Leo also doesn't really hit the spot for me, like maybe he could have had he look a bit different, but you know, that's not to take away from him or anything else. As far as dick rating goes, he's completely neutral, honestly. I don't even his dick is completely anonymous to me. I don't think it's funny, I don't think it's gross or anything like that. It's just there, he can exist. I won't care about it. Now, time to move on to the best boys tiers. Starting off with our dear swimmer, Avan, which as a swimmer automatically bumps him up several places in my ranking, because in case you couldn't tell, I love swimming, I love summer, I love anything that has to do with water. I've took swimming classes most of my life, even if I eventually had to stop for a series of reasons I'm not gonna get into now, but overall, just the fact that he's a water-themed character easily lands him a spot in the top 3 of my ranking. Even if it wasn't always like that, because, fun fact, before Demo 2, Avan was actually 4th and Bryce was 3rd, so yes, Avan did displace Bryce as the bronze medal on my podium. However, another reason why I tend to also really like Avan is because I really like his humor. In Demo 2 especially, he has this kind of dry British humor, which is like one of my absolute favorite kind of humor of banter you can have. And, you know, especially I love his expression when he gets only the dark dots up to the eyes. It's really perfect for him. I just love him so much when he acts like that, because he makes me laugh. It just puts a smile on my face. Beyond that, I also like the fact that he's certainly hardworking. I'm not someone that usually never escapes something hard, or, when it comes to having to work hard, I'm always down for it. So I do relate to him in this aspect. I'm not quite the same as him when it comes to organization and planning and stuff like that. I tend to more to take things as they come, but that's still something that endears him to me. The fact that he also is balancing all those things between, the studies and the council, and, having to take care of Yuuto. And also beyond that, I think that much like Cleo, he works with Ace really well, because you have Ace being more lazy and laid back, and then you have Avan or Leo that are, very active, always doing stuff. So, they all probably help Ace do more things in life, but he'll help them relax more. There is also, of course, the Preg Avan meme, which is the best meme in the Jock Studio fandom. It's so good, I love it so much. It needs to be humanity's universal treasure for how good it is. But, beyond that, speaking about Avan's body in general, and his ability that he may or may not be able to get pregnant, I quite like him, because in body he's very round, he's very cutesy in this soft kind of way, off in his ass, which is this very cute bubble butt, and then his specs, which are big and they look like boobs, and so also there is that hourglass shape that Aces often mention. I also very much like that, and of course he has a swimmer body, so I also like him for this reason, because we have a similar body. Of course, Avan, he's a lot more toned than me, but you know what I mean. Beyond that, his casual outfit, I think it's a bit strange. I get that this is his original look that Zyle, which is the creator and director of Jock Studio, intended for him. I like it. I like the plastic top he has with the transparent things, and I like his sandals, but I think it just doesn't really blow me away. And it also, which is a smart move, just not an aspect of his character that I particularly like, plays into his horny and generally want to show off sexually side, which I personally don't really appreciate that much. I'm not here for the sex, I'm here for the story. And so I can say that the only aspect of his character which I don't really like in any particular way. Then as far as Dick goes, he is largely fine. I would have preferred him to see him uncut, but he's cut alright, fine. It's not particularly big, it's not anything special, but it's also, I'm not completely neutral to it. It's funny enough, I think it does its job, but I think that out of the Jock, he has the most average dick for me. Now, with Avan out of the way, let's upgrade to a much bigger size, and let's talk about the biggest boy in the cast, Derek, which is by far my second most favorite character in the game. I just find him really cute, in the sense that, yes, he's this big burly football player, but he's also, a real teddy bear. He's sweet, he's caring, but overall I think that what draws me most to him is just overall his story, because he's just so interesting. I'm really curious to explore during the course of the game the depth of his trauma, why he wants to be so protective towards Ace, what his ex did to him, what happened in the porn industry, because yes, as much as we can imagine it, I don't think we'll truly understand what's behind, all that happened to him that made him start out Impulse U, then go to porn, and back to Impulse U. I don't think we'll understand it until he tells it, or until maybe Ace discovers it on his own, because, I think someone out there must also know. I don't think Derek is the only one that was present, during his time in the porn industry. So it's not impossible for us to learn it from a third party, and that is gonna very much create some potentially good conflict later on. But overall, as I said before, Derek just represents what really sells me personally on the BL fantasy, having this really big man as person you'd think would be very stoic, but then in the story you get to explore just how vulnerable he is, how he feels as a person that, clearly has a lot of baggage, a lot of trauma, and exploring, dissecting that, I think he will probably be one of my absolute favorite routes in the game, because I know I'm repeating myself, but it's just so interesting to me. However, one of the things that make Derek only reach the silver podium is that, in my opinion, his ship with Ace, so the main ship the game encourages, is a bit inorganic in my opinion. It doesn't feel quite as natural as the others because Derek and Ace have a pretty big age gap of 5 years and an even bigger experience gap, which I think would more so make Ace gravitate towards the other guys when it comes to romantic partners and consider Derek more so a mentor. And same goes for Derek, I think he would maybe more so see Ace as his mentee. Now, of course, the justification that is given for why Derek sees Ace as a potential romantic partner is that he reminds Derek of his ex, which is not the healthiest thing in the world. And again, even if this relationship is not textbook healthy in a way that from start to finish, it's overall still a game, it's still fiction, it's still a story that needs a conflict to be told and a narrative pacing in that sense. So I can't really get mad at this detail because, again, it's fiction. We are allowed in this sense to bend the rules of what would be considered healthy and acceptable in reality a little bit, not a lot, but a little bit, and this does it a little bit, but it's personally not something that I love, so Derek loses a few points for that, and also a few, really just a few points for his outfit, because although I really like the red shirt he wears and, you know, the wool undergarments he seems to have, I also don't really love the jeans in general. Like, jeans for me are just like a no fashion choice, and if they are ripped, even worse. And also the leather thing that, you know, it's clear they wanted to incorporate in his design because it's kind of implied that leather is gonna be one of the kink we'll explore in Derek's route. And they wanted to, of course, translate it to his day-to-day outfit, but I think that the way they did it with those weird straps he has around his body make it feel a bit of an fashion choice out of character, because I don't think they would be very practical, and Derek is a very practical person, so that's also a minor drawback for me. When it comes to his body, however, Derek is just pure unalterated vanilla hunk goodness, and I really just can't say anything more about it than he's just such a good example of a hunk, of a BL hunk that I really love. And beyond that, well, his crown jewel in the crown of the king is very long, but it's also a bit thick, which overall is like, it gets a very high funny rating for me, because as I said, the bigger they are, the more hilarious the situation becomes for me, and more, in a sense, enjoyable, even if I don't never quite enjoy myself during the sex scenes to any significant degree. But overall, yes, it's big, it's long. I think it's a bit thick for my likings, but, you know, in terms of having someone that is both long and thin, my number one options perfectly covers that. So, time to move on to the absolute best boy in the game that occupies alone the amazingly incredible spectacular tier is none other than, of course, Zane! Paradoxically, I think that the exact reason why Zane is the least popular character among all the love interests is the exact same reason why I like him so much. He's so incredibly mysterious. His intentions are very hard to gauge, and I think that's why people kind of default to seeing him as the snobby, rich playboy that, you know, is not necessarily gonna care about Ace's feelings. But if you pay a bit more attention, you'll see that he is a very caring person, and in general, yeah, he's popular, but he's not bitchy, he's not spoiled, he's nice, he's understandable, and he even has some traits that are more inclined towards, you know, someone that is humble. Because yes, overall, despite his fame, despite everything, he's very humble, but he's also very tormented in a sense. Because you can tell there is something in his life, as perfect as it may look from the outside, that doesn't quite sit right with him, and that might have to do as much as with, you know, with the fame, all the drawbacks that come with it, but also with the way he feels internally and inside. There must be something about him that he clearly hides very well, that however ends up making him unable for some reason to find this real connection with someone that he really seems to seek. And in spite of everything, I think that he actually works very well with Ace, because you have Ace treat him like a normal person, and he can very often also bring out, you know, a genuine smile, a genuine laughter out of Zane, which for a character that is always so set in his behavior, in his ways, he's always very proper, and even if he gets sometimes a little carried away with wordplay, you can definitely not tell me he doesn't have all the class in the world. Even Ace mentioned just how royal he is, how, you know, he has this aura of a prince, which creates this dynamic between Ace and Zane of kind of the popper and the prince, which I find very, very sweet in a sense that, you know, even in the higher echelons of society, you won't really find someone that understands Zane, that has the kindness, the humility that Ace has, that brings out the best in Zane, and that will bring out the best in Zane from the course of the game, and of course it will come with Zane having to face his demons and all of that. But overall, from like the whole mystery to the interesting angle that takes to the most popular guy in a school approach, and just in general the way Zane works with Ace is what really sells me on him as my favorite character. I don't think I have much negative about him in any sense beyond the fact that I want to know more, but we'll have to wait until 2027. Hopefully when you are watching this video it's already out. But yeah, I only have positive things to say about his character, and even his character design honestly is pretty damn flawless. The thing I like the least are his black pants, but even then they have a pretty cool texture that kinda saves it for me. Then his shirt is pretty funny because like he might not as well have it because it's basically made of nothing, but you can tell this is like this very cool fabric that gets to show off like his abs, his pecs, and that's really cool. I also really like his shoes, even if he doesn't wear socks for some reason. And of course, the charming point, probably most best part about this design, I'm not even making sense for how much I like it, is his hair. I like that he has long hair instead of, you know, the usual short hair that most love interests have had up to this point. I especially like the element of the man bun. Many people don't like it, and I understand why, but I personally do. I think he gives him like such a nice face shape, and it just works well with like his feature in general. And I love his bun so much so that when he lets his hair down, I actually like him less, to be honest, because you go from Zane having this bun with his very particular shape because it's empty inside, but then you go back and when he ties it, it's just wild and unkept. I think I would like it more if he had a good hairstyle. In fact, I think he does have like a different hairstyle in the swimmer for the beach, and I also really like that hairstyle. But sticking to what we have already gotten in the demo as official content, Zane is honestly flawless. Then the jewelry, the piercings are just the cherry on top of this absolutely mountain of goodness, which doesn't even end here because like his body is damn perfect. He's like fucking body goals. Yes, he's dry, but he's still like a hunk, and he's like lean, but you know, he's just such an harmonious body shape, and I'm honestly kind of jealous. I wish I had that good of a body, but you know, I'm not a handsome basketball player, so I'll have to deal with that. And as I mentioned at the beginning, his dick is just top tier funny to me. Like, it's so long, it's so goofy. Honestly, most of the time I think that out of all of the dicks, he will be the one that will get the most laughs out of me, because it's just so not even necessarily unproportionate to his body, but it's just so long that it's just funny. I don't know, it's just funny. And then the piercing, I mean, for me personally, it doesn't do anything, but it's just that additional elements that really makes Zane's dick the most unique dick, I think, in the Jock Studio universe. So in that sense, also the fact that, you know, he has the foreskin, and you can basically choose between foreskin mod on and foreskin mod off. That's also a pretty nice detail, and I think it will add some good variety to the sex scenes, even if I'm not necessarily the most adequate person to enjoy them like they are supposed to. But on that note, Zane's route also has Juno, which is low-key the hottest character in the game for me, and not that it's necessarily much of a competition, but still, that's some hot stuff for me right there. So I know a reason to like Zane even more. To quickly recap then, we have Bryce in the fuck you tier, Yuuto in the definitely mediocre tier, certainly fine inside houses Leo, while best boys houses Avan and Derek, amazingly incredibly spectacular instead it's some of only my love Zane. So I'd say that ends it. This is my official love interest ranking tier list. Let me know if you like it. This was a very different video for me. It was completely unscripted, which was really nice after I had to read like that long of a script for the last 2 videos. But overall, let me know what you think. Feel free to roast me for my takes. Feel free to agree with my takes. The comments are just one click away. And overall, let me know if you want some other kind of Jock Studio tier list, you know, some kind of easier content for me that doesn't require hours upon hours and months of research and development. But anyway, I have been your host Trained Up, and this has been the Jock Studio Love Interest tier list.